Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'll take credit. Nick, thank you so much. All right. So our next speaker is a longtime friend of SU and someone we've had in the ecosystem for quite a while. John Hagel is an author. He is the co-chairman of Deloitte's Center for the Edge, and he is a very deep thinker around leadership and innovation. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome to the stage John Hagel.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. I was asked to speak on platforms and ecosystems, and I have to say that was fairly intimidating because everybody is talking about platforms and ecosystems. What could I possibly say that would be different and helpful relative to everything else that's been discussed? But I'm hoping that by the end of my presentation, I'll have convinced you that we're barely scratching the surface of platforms and ecosystems, and that there's an untapped opportunity waiting to be addressed that could create so much more value for all of us. And so that's my focus for today. I'm going to start by setting some context, and that's first of all something that you're going to hear about through the entire 3 days here, is that we are increasingly moving into an exponential world, being shaped by exponential technologies. And that exponential world has a lot of implications for us. And one of the things that we're hearing with increasing frequency is the notion that all of us as individuals are going to have to commit to lifelong learning. That's the key. Every day for the rest of our lives. I believe there's an even greater imperative for our institutions. And what I'm talking about here is the need for exponential learning. That in an exponential world, if we're not learning faster and faster, we're going to be increasingly marginalized. We have to find ways to learn exponentially. And here I want to just clarify, when I talk about learning, I'm not talking about learning in the form of sharing existing knowledge, going to a class and listening to a teacher. No, the learning I'm talking about is learning in the form of creating new knowledge that was never known before, and doing that through action and impact. And the way to measure that learning is not by taking tests and getting test scores. It's by accelerating performance improvement. If we're not accelerating performance improvement, we're not learning exponentially. And that's the key imperative that an exponential world creates, because in an exponential world, everything we know is becoming obsolete at an accelerating rate. So if we're not learning faster and faster, we are going to be marginalized. And so I think in that context, the question is, what role can ecosystems and platforms play? And I'm going to start here by focusing on ecosystems and start with a definition, at least what I mean by ecosystems, because one of the challenges I see in all this discussion of these topics is the word is used so loosely. It comes to mean anything. What I'm going to focus on is what I call performance ecosystems. And what I mean here is that they're organized to include a large number of independent participants, not a small number, but hundreds, thousands, increasingly even millions of participants. And these participants are being organized to achieve a shared goal. Now, there are many different forms that ecosystems can play. Based on the research that we did at the Center for the Edge, we identified 12 very distinct ecosystems. Different ways of organizing, different ways of delivering results. I'm not going to go into all 12. By the way, I'm going to cover a lot of our research. It's all freely available. We don't charge for the research, so you just have to ask and we can share it. But I'm going to focus here on two different categories of ecosystems. what I call static ecosystems and dynamic ecosystems. And what I mean here in static ecosystems, let me start there. Static ecosystems are approached with the mindset of there's a given set of capabilities and resources out there that we need to connect, and we can create value by connecting those static resources and capabilities. But the resources and capabilities aren't changing, they're a given. The whole focus is on how do we connect the participants to access them more efficiently. And basically, most of the ecosystems we have today, the performance ecosystems, are these static ecosystems. Classic example would be a market ecosystem, connecting buyers and sellers to buy and sell products and services. The products and services are a given. It's all about connecting the buyers and sellers. And it's about short-term transactions. And I want to emphasize that these static ecosystems can create enormous value. I actually wrote a book 10 years ago called The Power of Pull. And one of the key themes in The Power of Pull was the emerging necessity for pull in the form of access. How can we access more and more resources and capabilities to address our needs at the moment? It creates the ability for flexibility. We have much more flexibility if we're participating in an ecosystem where we can connect to those resources and capabilities on demand as we need them. It also creates the opportunity for leverage. In a world of increasing pressure, the ability to connect into an ecosystem where we can choose to just focus on the things that we're really good at and rely on others to provide the other capabilities and resources, huge value. So I don't in any way want to suggest these static ecosystems don't matter. They matter hugely. But I think the question is there something else? Is there another form of value that can be created through ecosystems? And here I'm going to focus on this other category that I mentioned, dynamic ecosystems. Dynamic ecosystems come at the mindset of the organizers of these ecosystems is, yes, there's a given set of capabilities and resources out there that we could connect, but the real opportunity is to help the participants to accelerate their performance improvement and evolve those capabilities and resources at an accelerating rate. So it's a dynamic view of those capabilities and resources. And the focus of the ecosystem is how do we organize to create an environment where those capabilities and resources can evolve more rapidly. Fundamentally different mindset, different way of organizing. Now, we've done a lot of research on what's required to scale learning in those kinds of ecosystems. And one of the things we came up with was that the fundamental unit of organization in these ecosystems is a small group. It's 5 to 15 people that come together in work groups, or I prefer to call them cells, where they're working together on a daily basis. They get to know each other very well. They develop deep trust-based relationships with each other. And they're committed to getting more and more impact, to learning faster together. And I think if we're talking about learning in the form of creating new knowledge, those deep trust-based relationships are really important, because that kind of learning involves a lot of failure. And I'm going to be much more willing to fail if I'm in a group that I really trust versus a group that may be out to get me. So coming together in these small work groups, absolutely critical to accelerating learning. And by the way, other research that we've done shows that those small work groups, the more diverse they are in terms of the participants, in terms of the people and the backgrounds and perspectives that they bring, the more diversity, the more creative they are, the faster they learn. But the unit is 5 to 15 people. Here's the challenge. That's not scalable. It's 5 to 15 people. Our research shows that if you get above 15 people, the trust begins to weaken, to thin. So we recommend maximum 15 people in these small work groups. The question is, how do you scale that? Well, that's where the ecosystem can play a huge role, because it's by, first of all, helping to organize those small work groups, bringing people together in these small work groups, but then connecting those work groups into a broader network so that it can scale and these cells or work groups can learn from each other. Very different way of organizing. It's something that we've ended up calling creation spaces. And our belief is if you're serious about exponential learning, we need to organize creation spaces to accelerate the learning, starting with cells, but connecting them into broader networks. Now, there aren't a lot of examples of these kind of dynamic ecosystems that I've just been talking about. But there are some. We ended up looking at environments where there's sustained extreme performance improvement and see what we could learn in those environments about accelerating learning. And what we found was creation spaces. And I'll just give you a quick example, one of my favorites. We went out and looked at extreme sports. And one area we looked at was big wave surfing. Now, for those on the outside looking in, big wave surfing is a solo sport. There's only one person on that surfboard, that's it. Well, interesting observation. The big wave surfers, those who are really committed to getting better and better at more challenging waves, they're coming together in local surf breaks into small cells, work groups, 5 to 15 surfers that interact with each other on a daily basis, challenge each other, hold each other accountable, support each other when they fail. And those small cells on the local surf breaks are connected into a vast global ecosystem that's helping all big wave surfers learn faster on how to address challenging waves. So very